they can treat you however they like, provided it falls within the certain rules. But we're just not getting the evidence that it works from them, and we don't have the evidence that it works from animals. No, what I'm saying is that we don't know if it's successful. That's why these other clinical trials are out there now testing those cells. That's why there are all the trials now formally set up to test bone marrow and fat mesenchymal stem cells in a formal way to see if it works. It might work, but we don't know. So these are the first stages. They first of all want to see if it's safe, and if it's safe, then they'll go on to trials to see if it works. No, that's right. It's just clarifying that in animal studies we can put the cells in, we can even label them in some way before we put them in, and then we can look at the spinal cord afterwards and say, yes, they're there a week, a month, 3 months later. But with humans, there's no approved way to label the cells, for example, to see them in an MRI. There are ways we can do that in animals, but those methods haven't been approved for humans. There's a question down here. The question is there a time frame to see whether the trials work? No, I can't. If you talk to a lot of people, they'll say, oh, it's 10 years away. Well, don't believe anybody who says something that's just 10 years away. All we can say is that the field, the world is taking these steps one at a time. And most of it is done in a cottage industry way, the way that we did ours, not big funded. So that, by the time, as I say, ours took over about 7 years because we were transplanting people at different times. We followed them for 3 years each. And then it takes a while before it gets published, and that's when it becomes the gospel, if you like, once it's been approved by your peers through that publication process. So these first safety trials will progress over the next few years, and then after that they'll be doing those bone marrow transplantation efficacy trials over the next probably 5 years. So bone marrow, it's true, bone marrow transplantation or mesenchymal stem cells, probably within 5 to 10 years we'll know whether they work. Whether embryonic stem cells or other stem cells, I would not put that at the same kind of time frame. Yeah? So bone marrow transplantation in multiple sclerosis is slightly different. One of the reasons for doing a bone marrow transplantation in multiple sclerosis is not to provide cells to do the repair as you would in the spinal cord, but it's to, you take the cells out and then you totally wipe out the bone marrow, their immune system, and you put their stem cells back in the hope that they'll repopulate their immune system, which won't have the cells that make the antibodies against their own cells. So multiple sclerosis is one of the major drivers of that, certainly a major part of that is an autoimmune disease. So that if you could get a bone marrow transplant so the cells that are acting against you are like out here. So we kill all those off, supply more stem cells down here to make new cells that won't attack you. So that's a different context than for a spinal cord injury. Yeah, the question is in China, Dr. Wise Young, who's organising, they've got an umbilical stem cell trial, and I think a bone marrow stem cell trial, and some combination of cells and drugs, and they're all still in the early stages. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, some of those are still recruiting, and some of them are in the wait and see, having recruited, they're now following them. But they're still early phase 1 trials. Some of them on that clinicaltrials.gov show their phase 1/phase 2, so they're measuring some kind of efficacy, but they're all basically still at a very early stage. Sounds like it's lunchtime.